Yes, Anisha, can you hear me? As I can see, you are connected. It still can't be confirmed enough whether the connection is properly working or not.
Yeah, ঠিক আছে।
Yes. Okay. So where is the other one? That's the big question at the moment. It's 7:04. Anyway, at least there should have been some update.
কেটে কেটে যাচ্ছে কথাগুলো।
এখনো দেখতে পারলাম না কখন জয়েন করবে বা কিছু। একটু ফোন করে জানবো তারও উপায় নেই, কারণ যা হচ্ছে এটাতেই হচ্ছে, অন্য কোনো সেট আনিও না। চেষ্টা করে দেখি।
হুম হুম হুম।
This tripod should be get. Look at this tripod.
ভীষণ সমস্যা হচ্ছে, মাঝে মাঝে কথাগুলো আটকে যাচ্ছে।
না, এখনো পর্যন্ত কিছু বলিনি, জাস্ট
হুম।
ট্রাইপডটা দূরে রেখে গেলাম যে এটা ডিস্টেন্স হওয়া উচিত পজিশন। ওকে, সো হ্যাভ ইউ জয়েন্ট? Just check your connection, whether the audio is properly being linked or not, being synchronized or not.
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay, then fine. For the moment, at least, you may turn your audio mute and welcome you all to yet another sitting of our Crafts of Understanding. Though it seems a bit uncanny because still the final examination of your fourth semester is still left out. And as I came to know that there happens to be the notice regarding the filling up of the form of the examination. So this may be, this may be, this is certainly a prelude to the commencement of the examination, though it was first suspected that it would be scheduled in the first week of August, probably first or second week of August. But now the third week of August is now going on, and it's a bit strange. It's a bit uncanny why the authority is getting so much delayed. And from my side, it has to be said that the completion of the curriculum of your fourth semester, the previous one, was a little bit hurriedly done. Actually, it should have been said that this was not that necessary because initially none of us really suspected that the exam is going to be in such a delayed format, in such a postponed format. So the other group, which is conspicuously devoted to the circulation of the material of the course, thereupon you will be getting, I'm still hopeful enough that a handful of selected issues may be given on Sam Silverdore's Funny Boy. So I'm still hopeful and working on it, though the processing is left out a little bit, not a lot. So you will be getting all the issues over there, and clearing it up, only after clearing it up, I will be omitting all the previous threads so that the new circulation of the new issues may be done. And I will be requesting you to do the same only after the completion of the exam. But for the moment, at least, let us see when this session is going to be organized. But time can't be positing itself at the juncture of a still pause. So we eventually have to move on, and that is why the completely new journey of fifth semester is initiated just before the allotment of your exam schedule. In that case, I would like to add a little bit that if you are going to have your exam just after this week, and one of those days is going to be colliding with our schedule of sitting, then the Sunday there should not be any problem with the Sunday slot. So if there is going to be any problem regarding the Wednesday slot, if there's going to be any collision of two schedules, one belonging to us and another belonging to that of the exam timetable, we will be just switching over to Sunday for the moment at least, and then only after the completion of the exam, everything will be okay. But that's anybody's guess at the moment. So we will be having a slow but steady start, of course. Furthermore, I would like to add a few more uh, aspects that initially, when it was started in April 2021 this year, I started on 11th of April, and I think simultaneously, by the same flow of time, your schedule of the college classes was initiated. So primarily, we suspected that they're going to take as many as 4 months for the completion of the syllabus, as it was reported from the authority that some of the months may be scrapped because we are already lagging behind the time. So, since it was started in April, we thought that it would take as many as 4 months, starting from April to May, June, July, and it actually happened in such a wavelength. It ended up in July. I don't know what is the current status of the remaining fourth sem syllabus taken by our other reputed professors. I know about a few of them, of course, who have successfully completed the course, but don't know about the remaining ones. And that should not be the crux of discussion at this moment. What I would like to really predict at this juncture is, since your exam is getting delayed, and a basic assumption is that there's going to be the schedule of exam by the end of this week, or not by the end of this week, by the starting of the next week, which means the fourth week of August, you uh, probably are having to get your fifth semester schedule commenced by the start of the first week of September. This is a basic assumption. And still, we don't know whether there is going to be a flow of normalcy immediately after the puja vacation or not. But keeping all the probabilities aside for the moment and taking the kernel of possibility that there is going to be the commencement of your fifth sem schedule right from the beginning of the first week of September, it would be safer for us to just to get a sort of apprehension that this semester two would be comprising as many as 4 months, if not more. So starting from September, it should take a temporal frame up to December, and we hereby are targeting to completing our discussion, our sitting here in the crux of understanding by the end of November or by the first week of December. But we will be continuing in a gradual progress. the assumption of the fourth SIM schedule, which was initially suspected to be allotted in the last week of July, was absolutely a wrong assumption from our point. So this time we will be having quite a lump sum length of temporal frame and would act accordingly as per the situation. So starting by the mid of August happens to be one of the ideal commencements, of course, and just right at our introductory sitting of the semester 5, though the syllabus is well acquainted to you all, or at least I expect that it should be acquainted, the course structure. I would like to introduce to you the structure of the papers here in this semester, and only after having a basic kind of introduction, I will be rather explicating the widespread possibility of the current UG syllabus for the moment, and then we'll be concluding today's discussion only after having all these aspects one by one, bit by bit, in a gradual flow, and we will be completing with the notion of post-colonialism just to get the grasp of our next city, which is eventually allotted to be eventually assumed to be allotted on Sunday. So let me start the process of displaying the curriculum first of all, and then we will be attaining each point of discussion in a gradual on a gradual basis. So just let me start. Just let me get acquainted with the fact that whether the screen is visible to you all. Yeah, is it visible to you all?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this is the case. This folder should be renamed hereafter. Never mind. Here we have got the curriculum and just have a look at it. You know, primarily whenever we talk about the study of English literary discourse, English literature, in terms of our graduation and post-graduation syllabus, let alone the post-graduation syllabus, and take the instance of the undergraduate syllabus only. Primarily, uh, it is devoted to adhere a study of the British literature to a vast extent. To some extent, the inclusion of the American literature and the Indian writing in English are seen to be included from time to time in the old pattern of syllabus. But now, I think this chart would be absolutely befitting to have a kind of introductory notion of deliberation. But nowadays, the syllabus that your batch and the previous batch immediately prior to your session, uh, the subsequent two batch, the syllabus which you are having currently at the moment, has been preoccupied with a tremendous scope of improvement embedded with a number of fields of inquiry. As you know, the basic notion of the British module of literature, the module of British literature, so to say, has already been introduced to you during the course of your first semester. As you know, there have been in CC1 and 2, respectively, the British poetry and drama, and yeah, the British poetry and drama of the Old and Middle English period. And then after that, you have got some of the cult text of the Renaissance age up to 17th and 18th century. Then, of course, in your semester 2, you have got British literature, the fiction, both the fiction and the non-fiction of 18th century, the pre-romantic age in particular. And after that, you have got the entire notion of the British romantic literature, taking a handful of cult writers, cult poets, and literary figures incorporated in the curriculum. starting with William Blake to the romantic legends such as William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge, Keats, and Shelley, of course. And I don't know alongside Blake whether there was any other figure of precursors of Romanticism was there or not. But anyway, that is not the main crux of this deliberation in particular. I'm just summing up the entire issue. So up to this, we have got the predominant notion of British literature up to your semester two. That means the second half of your first year, if I have to take the uh, temporal frame of the old syllabus. Now, coming to semester three, there happened to be as many as three papers which goes by the name of CC 5, 6, and 7, the core three papers. And thereupon, you have already got British literature up to 19th century that conspicuously covers the Victorian age, as you can see. It should have been 1831 to 1900. Anyway, the Victorian age. Then in CC6, of course, you have got the early 20th century literature. That means it covers the age of modernity. And only after that, not much of postmodernistic literature was included at the moment, but only after having your all deliberations regarding the modern literature, starting with T.S. Eliot, W.H. Auden was not included, but W.B. Yeats happens to be included over there. Starting with these cult figures, just a shift of syllabus, just a shift in the formation of the curriculum is to be witnessed. And what is that shift? You know, right in your core course 7, that means CC7, you have got a bit of American literature. And both the fiction and non-fiction was included there, um, being backed up by a drama. Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire was also over there. So only after having completed the discourse on modern literature, which was primarily encompassed by the gigantic module of British literature, you have got a bit of introduction of the plethora of the milieu of American literature. And only after completing your entire course of third semester, having both the kernels of British and the American literature, there happened to be a drastic change, a drastic shift in the setting, in the arrangement of the curriculum of your fourth semester. As you know, we have completed um, it from April to July, and there happened to be the European classical literature comprising um, Ovid, Homer, Sophocles, and Plautus, four cult classical figures. There happened to be the modern European drama comprising three different genres of modern drama, starting with Samuel Beckett's absurd drama Waiting for Godot. Then there was, of course, the realistic play by Henrik Ibsen, which goes by the name of Ghosts. And there happened to be one of the uh, recent day implementation in terms of the epic theater in the hand of Bertolt Brecht. And of course, the cult text over there was The Good Person of Saint-Saëns. Only after just a shift was discussed right at the termination of the British module over there in your third semester, terminating at the point of CC6. And here, just after witnessing two varied module of different tastes, which goes by the name of European classical literature, a vast one, and comprising both the Greco-Roman uh, development of literary studies and aesthetics. Because without knowing the aesthetics, as you know, we have already come across all these points. Without knowing the rules, terms and conditions, and aesthetics, it is really tremendously tough to get the kernel of the literary essence of the European ancient classical literature. So, just as I was talking about, only after having completed two varied genres of European classical literature and modern European drama, comprising three different subgenres, you have got the idea of popular literature. Now, as you know, during the termination of your last semester, I have told you that popular literature highly depends upon its widespread notion of the readers comprising varied interests. There happen to be the crime fiction, children literature, and selected nonsense from our own patch of ground of Bengal. So, clearly, one thing is quite understandable to us by this point is that is just turning away from the predominance of the British module, your undergraduate syllabus is embellishing itself with the notion of a widespread appeal. The appeal that eventually is going to enable you with the eligibility of uh, attainment of several kinds of national level exams, state levels also. So the incorporation of the varied notion of literary genres, subgenres, and differentiated fields of inquiry is eventually setting forth the entire curriculum of UG Vidyasagar University to be a unique one because this happens to be a holistic one. And as you know, in your semester pattern, though a handful of text were included there in each of your paper, it is primarily quite natural to expect that the student, the learner, would be completing at least the ethos of the other cult versions of the respective ages so that an entirety of the knowledge may be formed. So, up to the point of popular literature, we have completed our journey of fourth semester, and you know, just as I was telling earlier at the beginning of today's sitting, still one issue is left, if not to be discussed, then to be circulated, of course. Now let us come to your first step of third year. So gradually you are becoming the senior most batch, and with the attainment of seniority, there comes the attainment of responsibility also. And it would be only possible to gain the sort of responsibility whenever we are preoccupied with a vast range of acquaintance. And here, the vast range of acquaintance comes with the notion of two more differentiated subgenres of literary field of inquiry. As you know, the couple of core papers, which goes by the name of CC11 and CC12, are comprising within themselves, respectively, the subgenre of post-colonial literatures and the women's writing or women literature to be conspicuous enough. Now, these two happens to be two of the most recent developments of the entire milieu of English literary studies. Not only English literary studies, we are taking the Eurocentric notion of English since we are to deliberate each and every course over here by means of this language. We can really say that um, with the advancement of all the literary studies all over the world, taking it up to an international level, post-colonial literatures and women's writing happened to be two of the most recent developments, the latest ones in the milieu of the entire studies of humanity. Not only that, backed up by those, you are going to have two more deliberations in the form of 19th century European realism, which is carrying quite a significant marks, of course, It is almost the same as you have already got in your previous papers, which is full mark 60, of course. And there comes world literature, carrying the same mark. Now, regarding these later two issues, which is, of course, DSE 1 and DSE 2, it would be only clearer to us that which sections of 19th century European realism in the form of literary development, in terms of literary development and world literature, which of the exact pieces are to be taken up in your curriculum, that is still to be unraveled, of course, because there is uh, no clear-cut mention over here. But of course, we have got the mentions of post-colonial literatures, the text under the plethora of post-colonial literatures, and of course, the text belonging to the subgenre of women writing. That means the textual attainments of CC 11 and CC 12 are clear to us, but the later two are still to be unraveled, and we will be definitely waiting um, for a reasonable temporal span to know the kernel about them, the kernel of them. So just let us jump to the section of the textual attainments of fifth semester, and here we come. Yeah, so we have reached that point. Okay, what happened in your previous semester was um, you have got differentiated genres of text. You know, if we if I have to take at this moment the example of your CC9, which was dedicated to modern European dramas, on a clear-cut level, you have got three dramas belonging to different subgenres. Or just take the example of classical literature. On one hand, you have got the grand epic, at least the first book of grand epic of Homer. On the other hand, you have got one of the celebrated tragedies of the age. So, differentiated text was over there to be analyzed, to be explicated, and deliberated and ultimately perceived. But here, as you know, genres have been clearly mentioned, and under those genres, which goes by the name of poetry, fiction, poetry and fiction, and of course, here in the under the subgenre of fiction, we have got novel and stories. So, just taking it roughly, under the genres of poetry, novel, and stories, we are to take up as many as six authors under the curriculum of post-colonial literature. In the poetry segment, we are supposed to have Pablo Neruda's two writings. Tonight I Can Write, very much chiefly devoted to the notion of textual development during the post-colonial issues, the way Spain was. Then we have got the Caribbean poet Derek Walcott and two of his renderings, A Far Cry from Africa and Name. After that comes one of the latest writers, Mamang Dai, and just a minute. Yeah, these two renderings, Small Towns at the River. Is the screen still visible to you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, yes.
Actually, here just at the edge of my sitting place. Actually, I'm facing a little bit of problem of raining, so just I need to change the space a little bit, and I think it is done. Yes. So two renderings over here: small towns and the river, and voices of the mountain. So as many as a total of six poems we are to take up. And of course, we will be starting with Derek Walcott's A Far Cry from Africa. It would be very much enchanting and gripping for you to understand the entire notion of post-colonialism. But prior to that, let me finish the other structural discussions as well. And the next one, of course, that means after the post-colonial literature, we have got the syllabus concerning itself with women's writing. So we have already done with the introduction of poetry. Then there comes the cult post-colonial text of our age, that is Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart happened to be an African novel concerning itself with all the colonialized colonized African characters and their interaction. We will be having the notion of things fall apart from a chief textual point of view as well as from a contrapuntal point of view, shifting the genre of niche audience of the particular novel. Then, of course, we have had stories by Bessie Head and Amata Aidu. Two stories are there, The Collector of Treasures and The Girl Who Can, respectively. So, since we are starting by the mid of August with the post colonial literature at our hand, and our old schedule of sitting is persisting, which is, of course, one is today, that means Wednesday, and another one is happen to be, of course, on Sunday. It would be better for us if we intersect the entire arrangement of sitting a little bit. And later on, I will be coming to you to uh, get to know your observations, suggestions, and requirements. So basically, what I have planned is to arrange our schedule on the basis of poetic development and the development of the stories on Wednesday. That means the Wednesday classes will be gradually, serially devoted to the study of post colonial poetry and stories, whereas the Sunday classes are to be devoted to Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. It will be taking some time, of course, and that is why, time and again, I have told you that in this session of sitting, of course, with the advancement of today's temporal frame, that it is definitely one of the ideal decisions on part of us to have our schedule by the mid of August, prior to having your fourth semester examination. We will be starting with the lead of issues. That means just at the very beginning, we will not be having the cult text like things fall apart, but let us understand the introductory notion, the terms and conditions, what the plethora of post colonial literature or post colonial literary theory has to offer to us. So, the Wednesday classes are definitely to be devoted to the development of post colonial poetry and stories, whereas the Sunday classes are devoted or dedicated to Chinua Achebe. Now, up to this point, everything is clear. Now, one interrogation there may arise at this moment, that up to which point we will be taking this. Now, since we are to deal with as many as four papers, and primarily we have talked that we will be having as many as 3 to 4 months to complete the syllabus in our hand, we are supposed to continue this session regarding the discussion on post colonial literary developments up to the third week of September. And whenever I am mentioning the temporal spans, it is definitely a tentative mentioning because still we have not planned how many classes or how many sittings are to be devoted corresponding to each text. But definitely soon enough it will be decided and the entire temporal structure will be transparent to you. So by the end of third week of September, I think our discussion on the post-colonial literary developments will be continuing. Then only after completing that, we will be coming to the introductory notions of feminism and the milieu of women's rights. Now, just like it is quite interesting and fascinating to notice that the anatomy that Vidyasagar University has decided to maintain in their UG curriculum of English honors is tremendously a great one. Just like the previous semester, you have got the clear-cut, dissected anatomical representations in under your curriculum, and that is again falls under the broad heads of poetry, fiction, and non-fiction here, not the story. Never mind, three differentiated genres containing a number of certain texts. So, as we have decided earlier that Sunday slots are to be devoted to Chinua Achebe by maintaining a static level, just after the finishing of our discussion on post-colonial literature, we will be devoting our study of Sunday classes, our sitting of Sunday classes to Mahashweta Devi's Draupadi, which has been immediately, eventually translated by one of the another cult figure in the milieu of post-colonial literature as well as in the milieu of women's writing. That is, of course, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. Actually, she happens to be invited in one of the seminars or one of the lecture series organized by our department. From our department, a number of initiatives were taken, but I don't know why. For some reasons or other, it was it was quite what can I say, deliberately dismissed by our honorable principal. There might have been some issues regarding this, but it would have been absolutely an amazing experience, let alone the present situation of being under lockdown and COVID pandemic. It would have been an absolutely great experience on part of you, and if given the chance on part of us to attend the lecture series or seminar by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. She happens to be one of the living legends in the milieu, and definitely famous for her contribution in the subaltern study. She happens to be one of the pioneers in this particular section, which comes under the milieu of post-colonial literature. Nevertheless, we will be having our Sunday schedules immediately after the third week of September devoted to Mahaspata Devi's Draupadi. Regarding Toni Morrison, we will be deciding whether to take up her text within that temporal span or not. And since Toni Morrison happens to be one of the chief figures under the plethora of women's writing, we will be definitely taking up her. And if not possible during our live classes, then the audios are to be definitely recorded with sincerity and care for Toni Morrison. So Sunday classes for the fiction, and of course the rule prevails. That is, the Wednesday classes are to be devoted to poetry. Here we have got Emily Dickinson's "I Cannot Live Without You," "I Am Wife," I have finished that. Three of the pessimistic poems, which falls under the category of feministic writer. We have got the tremendously, it can be said that Sylvia Plath's daddy happens to be a mouthpiece of feminist literature. And we in fact will be starting our discourse on women's writing with Sylvia Plath's daddy. And then there comes Eunice D'Souza's advice to women. Only after having completed the poetic development under women's writing, we will be having these two stories one by one. So, basic discussion on the syllabus has been done, and right at this moment, I'm just terminating the screen sharing procedure. Just check me a little bit whether there is anything left out or not. Okay, 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 okay. Just a moment. So, yes, we were talking about the issues on world literatures. I was just wondering whether there was. Just a moment. Yes, right at this point. Right at this point. We were talking about the topics of world literature, and here we have got the schedule. Sorry, we have got the contents. V.S. Naipaul's Bend in the River, Julio Cortázar's Blow Up, and Judith Wright's Bora Ring. So definitely, Bora Ring happened to be one of the shortest poems from her anthology, Moving Image, which was conspicuously embedded in our post-graduation syllabus of Commonwealth literature. So, whenever we will be completing our discussion on women's writing by the end of October, so to say, we will be jumping up to this section. And by concurring our interest on world literature, actually, these three of the out of these three issues, V.S. Naipaul and Judith Wright happens to be under my collection very well. But Julio Cortázar, that I have to collect and prepare the presentation in front of you. Okay, never mind. Only after having finished our discussion on women's literature, by the end of October, we will be taking up these issues. Definitely these ones, with a tremendous speed, of course. Then what is left out? The left out issue is, of course, the 19th century European realism, and here we have got two texts: Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and Gustav Flaubert, Madame Bovary. Yeah, it can be done very much. So let me just stop the screen sharing and just directly come to you. You may turn your microphone on for the moment and convey your concerns that so far what we have discussed is a chief temporal spanning of the entire fifth semester and the intersected schedules within which we are going to arrange our concerned text. That means for the first two papers, which happens to be the core papers, we have decided that the Wednesday classes are to be devoted to poetry and non-fiction, or poetry and story pair. And for the Sunday classes, there are the allotments for the fiction. Conspicuous gradually or respectively, first Chinua Achebe and then, of course, for Mahasweta Devi's Draupadi. September, September, October, and then in November we are going to take up these three issues regarding world literature, and only after finishing that we will be quickly encompassing those two issues which falls under the category of 19th century European realism. So first of all, I would like to request you to unmute your microphone and put on your camera to convey your concerns, whether there is going to be any problem regarding this pre-formatted notion of our course-wise discussion. Yes, one by one.
Yeah, I think it's quite convincing for this time, at least.
Okay. Now, Actually, there happens to be quite a great. Yes, Annesha, please tell something.
No, no, go on.
Okay. Actually, there happen to be quite a maximized number of texts in your first two papers. And had we been endowed with the pattern of your syllabus, of your questions in your paper, it would have been a little bit easier for us to uh, apply the rule of what can I say? Selection and elimination goes by the terms of Litton strategy. But since we are not still acquainted with the question pattern, we will be taking all the issues primarily and then would be deciding whether to what to take up and what to put aside for the moment, for the sake of examination, not for the sake of learning, of course, because learning is definitely a well expanded area which cannot be terminated by any means, by any terms and conditions. So, only having the maximized number of texts, we will be switching to the minimized version, not by means of their grandeur or their importance in the milieu of literary studies, but minimized by the standard of the quantity, by the standard of the numbers incorporated in a particular schedule. So if we have to take all these two papers, that means the paper on European realism on one hand and the world literature on the other, there happens to be as many as five assignments. So just mug it up and take it as a combined course of 19th century European realism and the world literature. That would be far easier to us to complete and to get the notion because five varied texts are over there and 1 month for the five texts um, going as per our intersected schedule format of Sunday and Wednesday, it would be tremendously impactful. So, starting with the post-colonial literature, as you know, that though initially I have decided that there was going to be lump sum amount of presentation on today's class, but later on I decided that the entire notion of post-colonial literature, first of all, has to be deliberated in an introductory format. Only after acquiring that and acquainting yourself with the latest terms of post-colonial literary studies, you will be able enough to proceed further. I've already prepared a detailed list of the post-colonial terms which I will be giving to you in our desired group only after finishing the discussion. Now, whenever we come to the notion of post-colonial literature, there comes one question in our mind. What is the exact scope of improvement and the area of encompassing notion falls under this particular subgenre of studies of literature and humanity? Now, if you just uh, Google a basic keyword or some of the basic keywords regarding the availability of the journals, pamphlets, anthologies, and other collections on post-colonial literature, the quantitative number that will eventually come out in front of you, eventually display themselves before you, would be absolutely fascinating because the scholars, the teachers, and all the devotees under this discipline quite conspicuously think, and definitely they are right, that out of all the subgenres of English literary studies in particular, there happens to be a gigantic expansion of this subgenre, which goes by the name of post-colonial literature, and prior to that, post-colonial literary theory. Only after having the theory understood, we will be able enough to get into the crux of post-colonial literature, what it is and what sorts of developments are eventually embedded under this subgenre. So the number are definitely quite fascinating. You will be getting tens and thousands of anthologies, pamphlets, books, and renderings in different journals regarding the post-colonial literature. Not only that, this happens to be one of those subgenres of the postmodern development of the English literary studies, which eventually incorporates within itself a number of differentiated sub-branches, which comes, which definitely one of them is diasporic writing, the subaltern writing that I was speaking about, pioneered by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, happens to be one of the chief agents which falls under the category of post-colonial literature. The notion of historicism, to a great extent, falls under this section, and there happens to be a number of other differentiated genres. Dalit literature too is, to some extent, though it has already established itself to be a self-sufficient genre of literature, but Indian Dalit literature happens to be uh, quite rightfully representing itself under the notion of post-colonialism, to some extent, of course. Only after its belongingness to that particular stream, it has eventually it has eventually enabled itself to be designated as a different genre of discipline. So, prior to understanding each and every crux and details regarding post-colonial literature, what we are to understand at this moment in particular is the notion of the term post-colonialism. The main word over here is colonialism, backed up by a prefix, that is post. And you know, whenever this prefix, namely post, is added prior to any particular word or event, it literally designates all the happenings after that event or after that particular expansion. So, in a common sense of understanding, of course, post colonialism in an Indian context should have referred to that particular phase which comes after 15th of August 1947. That is the general and most easy denotative notion of post colonialism, though it is not the entire explanation that I am talking to you. In Indian context, as far as the independence of India from the British colonial rule of prolonged period of 190 years is concerned, for India, the notion of post-colonial era comes only after 15th of August 1947. But that is not all, because post-colonialism does not only incorporate a number of differentiated subjects as varied as English, post-colonial political science, history, geography to some extent, and other literary outputs, for instances. Apart from incorporating differentiated domains of discipline, post-colonialism represents itself from a chiefly embedded cultural context, as well as a temporal denotation is embedded over there. And in order to differentiate between the cultural flavor of post-colonialism, rather socio-economical and cultural flavor of post-colonialism, and the temporal notion of it, the term itself happens to represent its notion with the help of two differentiated modules. You know, the way of writing post-colonialism as a word, as a singular word, has its two differentiated expressions. One is the hyphenated one, where the term, the prefix post and the main event or main term colonialism is differentiated with the help of one hyphen, post-colonialism, and another term is the non-hyphenated one, without the help of hyphen, post-colonialism, just as we have seen in case of postmodernism. Now, whenever we are to witness the hyphenated form of post-colonialism, the particular term is instigating us, is instructing us to acquire its notions of temporality. That means post-colonialism with a hyphen between the prefix and the main term, the principal term, is denoting to a particular moment of temporal expansion. Just a minute. The temporal expansion. Just I have told you just at this moment from a stipulated frame of understanding that in case of India, as far as the independence is concerned, or as far as getting itself free from the clutch of British colonialism is concerned, post-colonialism comes after 15th of August 1947. But that is not all, because uh, apart from having a temporal denotation, the term has its chief and enriched cultural connotation, which eventually has its tremendous effect on the socio-economical values also of the human civilization of differentiated province. In our next sitting, I will be showing you a map where the entire notion of Eurocentrism, that means the power structure which is conspicuously centered within the periphery of England only, is controlling a number of other countries under their domain, under their colonial domain. So whenever we are to explicate the notion of its cultural entity, post-colonialism, with a non-hyphenated word form, there is not at all any notion of temporal designation, because post-colonialism is a much debated and most interesting term that it represents itself to be commenced within a particular society, within a particular periphery, right from the beginning of colonialism itself. That means whenever we are to designate the temporal expansion, definitely for a particular province, it only starts whenever the clutch of the colonial country falls apart. And the so far colonized domain has a particular scope of representing itself with its own political and civilian ethos. But when it comes to the cultural and socio-economical context, then of course post-colonialism without the hyphen happens to be a term, happens to be a phenomenon, happens to be a perception that is started right from the beginning of colonialism. Just taking the example of our own context, the Indian context, the clutch of British rule happens to initiate its journey just in 1757, immediately after the fall of Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowla, with the rise of Robert Clive as he defeated the last Nawab and estimated their reign. And immediately before this, we know that Farrukshire, the Mughal Empire, has licensed a farman regarding the free trade right of British East India Company in particular. Many of us are at times confused with the notion of the name East India Company, but as you know, there happens to be a number of East India companies which came from the occidental province in the oriental zones in order to attain their commercial targets, commercial purposes, business fulfillment. What the hell is that? Okay. So there happen to be a number of East India companies, but Farrukhshia's Farman, so far as the uh, licensing of the Farman is concerned, it was chiefly centered on the trade rights of British East India Company. And a famous Bengali saying enhances us to think বণিকের মানদণ্ড দেখা দিল রাজদণ্ড রূপে. That means the mere trade rights of the British East India Company gradually converted itself to the political subjugation of the Indian province. And as you know, colonialism chiefly it's a forceful process, a forceful subjugation. Whenever we will be coming to Chinua Achebe's text, we will be getting the notion of both the physical subjugation and the cultural subjugation going hand in hand. So when in 1757 the first trace of British colonialism was started in India itself, the notion of post-colonialism began over there. Because with the invasion of British Empire, with the invasion of British trade rules, with the invasion of British in their physical level into this domain, there came their cultural structure, their social values, and for both the countries, that means the mother country, which eventually meant to colonize the other one, the mother country and the colonized countries, two forms of countries are to be seen over here. Both the cultural and socio-economical changes are to be witnessed in these two forms of provincial entities. When the Britishers decided to clutch India under their uh, colonial rule for a prolonged period of 190 years, starting from 1757 to 1947, of course, just one thing is clear that it is not only the Indians, it is not only the colonized province which are getting affected by all sorts of means. Rather, the colonizing country too, or the mother country too, is getting severely affected by means of its politics, affected rather to say, by means of its politics, by means of its economical entity, social structure, and whatnot. So, colonialism is a forceful implementation or imposition, we may say, and post-colonialism, in terms of with its cultural context and connotation, comes just right at with the beginning of colonialism. Whenever we are uttering the post-colonialism with hyphenated word, it merely denotes the temporal span. After 1947, for India, it turned out to be a colonization-free country with all its independence and own constitution to assert its own political, social, and humanitarian rights. So, whenever we are to discuss its cultural connotation, with the subjugative power of colonizing the other countries, there comes the notion of post-colonialism with the socio-economical and cultural development for both the countries, not only for the colonized ones. So here, with this notion, we are completing our introductory discussion on the structure of curriculum. And as I told you that there's going to be a bit of interpretations regarding the term. On Sunday, however, I am going to present in front of you probably a 60-slide long presentation on colonialism, post-colonialism, with all its temporal, cultural, social, economical, and literary connotations, of course. So for now, we may call it a day. Just immediately after the finishing of this class, I will be providing you with a Google Meet link, and you are requested to join over there to convey your orientations to, not for a wide span of temporality, but for a short time we will be discussing some other issues immediately subsequent to this. So, thank you for joining, and we will be meeting on Sunday. Just keep an eye on the group.